welcome to It's the Groove, the podcast that takes you behind the cellophane wrapper to uncover the hidden connections in the music we love. I'm your co-host, Dave. I go by the Twitter handle, The Sproles. And my co-host on the program is always Kelly. Say hi, Kelly.
It's me.
So, Kelly, you're a world traveler. Where are you dialing in from today?
Toronto, where I live.
Okay. All right. But you have some kind of Chicago connection too, don't you?
Well, I was born and raised in Chicago, and I love Chicago. I go back at least once or twice a year.
Cool. I was in Chicago last week for an Incognito concert. Really cool thing, and maybe we'll tell you a little bit more about it later.
Sure.
But we thought to kick off the podcast, we just give you a brief background as to who we are, what our passions are, what our goals are with the program. And so I guess the best place to start is how we met, because we're Twitter pals. I think we're about 30 months in as Twitter pals. And Kelly, do you want to give your side of the story first?
Sure. I had posted, Eric Alper asked a question about something about what's a song that you could listen to forever or something like you never get tired of hearing. And I posted Razzmatazz by Quincy Jones. And someone liked my tweet. Who was that?
That would be me.
Yes.
It's so interesting because to me that there's a zillion. And of course, when Eric does those posts, he gets thousands of replies.
Right.
But it's rare. I look at them and most of them are like really, really popular songs. And I kind of almost ignore that. And when I saw the Razzmatazz, I'm like, oh, this is somebody that really knows music, because not only was that not just not a top 10 hit, but also, Quincy wasn't necessarily, Quincy's a music guy, but he wasn't like Michael Jackson or Duran Duran or one of these other, mega groups or that kind of thing. Yeah. So I was pretty impressed.
I could have easily put a Duran song, but I didn't.
Okay, so if you did, which Duran song could you listen to forever?
I guess the one that popped into my head right away was "I Don't Want Your Love."
Oh,
yeah, it's funky. Okay. It's really good.
So one of the things that I remember right after that was I think I actually sent you a direct message and said something like, that's an interesting one. Tell me a little bit more about that or something. You probably remember more than I do. You've got a much better memory. But very shortly, we started talking about favorite groups. And I asked you what your favorite group was. And what was your reply?
Well, I probably said Duran. And somehow we started talking about Steely Dan. Maybe because you mentioned that Steely Dan was your favorite?
Probably, yeah. Yeah.
And I remember you said something like, I think I love you because I said I like Steely Dan. And I said, no, wait a minute. Slow down, pump your brakes. Because we just met.
That's another one, right? That's another one that, not everybody's going to pick. Now, since we've been developing the, kind of the community that we both belong to on Twitter, we found people that are, really into different groups, including Steely Dan. But at the time, everybody's, they're into the Rolling Stones or they're into, Taylor Swift or, whatever the flavor du jour is. And I found that it's really mostly very discriminating people that have very, very developed tastes are the ones that pick out some of these other groups. So, so anyway, I just remember that, at one point, and this is, like I don't know whether it was the same day, a couple days later, or whatever. I'm asking you about your favorite group, and you said Scritti.
Yeah, I had gone down the Scritti Politti rabbit hole during the pandemic, and I found out that they released 2 albums after Provision. Provision was the last album I had heard of, and that came out in 1988. And the one that they released in 1999 called Anomie and Bonhomie, I really liked. And so, yeah, they became one of my favorite groups.
So I'm going to show my in-depth knowledge of popular music, because when you said Scritti, I said, "Oh yeah, I know Scritti Politti. Perfect Way."
Oh,
And
yeah. What did I say?
yeah, you laughed at me, I think.
I
Because you're
laughed
polite. You're
and I
polite.
said, "Oh, they are much more than Perfect Way." And then I told you to listen to Cupid and Psyche 85 and
Yep,
Anomie and Bonhomie.
yep.
And what did you listen to?
So I did listen to Cupid and Psyche, and then I switched over and I started listening to Provision. And I'm going to tell you, 4 notes in on Provision, and I was hooked. And it wasn't the song, which I think is Boom, right? That's the lead song on that album. Boom, There She Was. It's a great song, but I was hooked to the whole thing. I mean, one song after another, and to me, there wasn't a bad track on the whole album, and it was completely listenable. And some of them kept pulling me back, again and again and again. So I think at the time we were both on Spotify, and all I remember is that at the end of the year, somewhere like right around Thanksgiving, the week after Thanksgiving, I think, Spotify sends the annual summary that they call Wrapped, with a W. And they had the Spotify Wrapped, and in the Spotify Wrapped, the one of my top songs for the year was Overnight off the Provision album. And keep in mind, this is like September that, that I started listening to them. So for all, they look at all the music that you've listened to all year, and they tell you, here are the 5 songs you've listened to the most. And Provision was one of those, even though it was 3/4 through the year before I even started listening to it, So I think I said Provision. That's the album. The song was Overnight. So, but interestingly enough, there's like 2 or 3 of them that showed up on my, on the top playlist. I think they give you, I don't know, 50 or some songs that are on your top playlist, and there was at least 3 from that album. So,
Yeah. I had dismissed Provision back in the 80s. When Scritti released Boom, I was kind of disappointed, I guess because it wasn't Cupid and Psyche 85 2.0. And then because you liked it so much, I started listening to it again, and it is actually a good album. And I'm sorry I dismissed it back in the 80s.
Well, I guess the point of this is that we've been able to kind of play off of each other. And I think that's one of the things that I've enjoyed the most about the community that's Music Twitter, is either learning new songs, and there's some of that, but also regaining our passion or interest for songs that we've heard before. And I know there's been a couple of instances of that, where we've been able to do that, right? And that to me is something that I think has led to our purpose, really, in putting together this podcast, which is maybe 5% to educate, because we're assuming that most of our listeners are pretty well educated when it comes to music, but also to illuminate some things that maybe they didn't know. And also to refresh or reinvigorate their passion for the music, um, and hopefully along the way, that will help to inspire some folks to, to dig in, to re-listen, just like you did with Provision, and just like I have with other songs, and to learn as well. So one of the things that also kind of brought us together about the same time was about when the game Hurdle started coming into being. And actually, I think they started something called Hurdle Decades, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
That started about that time, I think. And, I think it started with, even before the decades, it started with like maybe one or two different songs
I
a
think
day.
80s was first.
Was it? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm just pulling it up right now, and they've got 30 games.
Yeah, it's overwhelming now. It's really very overwhelming.
So, but you're right. I think it was 80s, and that's a decade that meant a lot to both of us. We were both, I think, going through our, pardon the phrase, but maybe our musical adolescence at that time.
I was really going through my adolescence.
Yeah, I'm not going to say anything about that, but we have a little bit of an age difference between the two of us, but not that much. And what I thought was interesting is that so that decade was meaningful to both of us in terms of music that maybe you were listening to at home, and music that I was listening to in the car or at school or something like that. So we started actually competing a little bit, and you wouldn't know it because you're from Canada, and everyone knows that people from Canada are nice, and I'm from Wisconsin.
I'm not from Canada. I'm from Chicago.
Everybody knows.
Although Chicagoans are very nice too.
Okay, I was trying to avoid that part, but okay, all right. So yes, people from Chicago and people from Wisconsin are very nice, but we have a little bit of a competitive streak.
Right.
And so as we were going through these games, I happened to notice that you were tanning my hide every single day in these, not just because the way the game is played, you get credit, if you will, for being able to name the song in fewer notes. So the faster you can identify the song, the better, and that's all going to be published. And when we would post our scores on Twitter, yours were always faster than mine. And in a lot of cases, you got songs that I had no clue about.
Mm-hmm.
So along the way, I think I happened to come up with a moniker for you and call you the 80s Music Muse. So
I like it.
So that describes. So if you're looking for Kelly on Twitter, just look up 80s Music Muse and you'll find her that way. So that then gets into, I think, our thoughts and ideas about the kind of music that we like. So what are some of the things that you like the best?
As far as music?
Yeah, groups or artists.
Well, okay, of course, Duran Duran, INXS, Sade, Skritty, who else? Shaka Khan, Stevie Wonder. A lot of the groups that we featured in Summer Soundscapes.
Yeah, that's what I remember is that the kind of the progression was we would have like a listen party where I vividly remember taking out like a Michael Jackson album, that and just say, hey, we're going to listen to that, and we'd listen to that, and as we started thinking about groups that we really liked, some of them like Duran Duran and I think Stevie Wonder. Some of them were pretty, big, significant. Some of them were groups that maybe not as many people are familiar with, like Jamiroquai, Swing Out Sister, and Chicago. So as we started kind of talking this through, we thought instead of just having a listen party between the two of us, let's see if we can create something to get some more people involved. So it was springtime, starting to get warm. In fact, it was probably around Memorial Day or even beginning of June last year when we're kind of coming up with this idea. And we noticed that there were, after you kind of got into summer, there were basically 10 weeks, between middle of June and the end of August. So we decided to do one artist per week, and we did it on a Sunday morning. And to be honest with you, I don't know if that was the right time or not. Maybe that was the worst time. But that's just the time that we felt, hey, you know what? There's no football going on. What else are you going to do Sunday morning? Let's do this. So the concept was we'd each come up with a handful of songs, and we'd post them, and maybe a couple of stories or a couple of remembrances if we'd been to concerts, with those groups and stuff like that. And then it started kind of getting a little bit. We started going a little bit off the rails a little bit. Do you remember that?
There was a lot of content, a lot of songs.
And the hard part is if you take some of these artists, we started really figuring it out. I remember even with Swing Out Sister, right?
Mm-hmm.
We'd take a little time during the week and we'd start coming up and say, well, let's just throw down a list of every song that we like. And we'd come up with like 30 or 40 songs for some of these artists. And then it's like, okay, we got to figure out, we can't do 30 songs. We got to figure out, let's limit it to like a dozen. And I can remember we always used to call it the negotiation, like who got to pick which song and all that kind of stuff. And I think you normally won because you're the better at arm wrestling. But anyway, that's how we would come up with it. And lo and behold, it was kind of fits and starts. I'm sure a lot of people were on vacation and weren't able to participate as much. But as we kind of got around it, we realized that we're getting a fair amount of engagement from people, and they'd be sharing some of the songs that they liked. And that was the other thing, right? So if we had 30 songs and we picked our top 12, we're hoping that some of the ones that we didn't pick are ones that other folks would share as well to try to get everybody involved, right? Mm-hmm. So we were doing that, and then as a result of it, we kind of realized as we started coming to the end, first of all, it's a little bit of work. We'd probably spend a couple hours a week, right? One time just kind of strategizing, which songs we should use, and then the next thing kind of coming up with, okay, what other content and who does what, and that kind of, and the arm wrestling.
And the information that we shared about each song and the artist, and then finding photos and then scheduling all of that. It did take time.
Yep. So one of the interesting things that came as a result of it was we realized we could put together, and you kind of led the charge with this, but we could put together kind of a retrospective where we really narrowed it down to like the top 3 songs for each group. And that was the hardest part, right? To try to get some of these bands down to like one of the absolute best songs. Or sometimes we'd go back and look at the engagement that the post had gotten to try to identify what our audience liked the best, but then come up with that and share that. So, I mean, even now, if you go on to our respective Twitter pages, you'll find the pin tweet there being that retrospective where you can actually link in and get the songs and that kind of stuff. So that was something that we got some enjoyment. And with all that work, we're like, maybe we need a little bit of a break. The football season was starting, etc. But very, very soon we started feeling the itch again, right?
Yeah, I kind of missed it.
Yeah. So, like, what can we do for the second chapter? And that's where we really kind of came up with um, the idea of doing a podcast. But doing a podcast is more than just picking a band and saying, okay, we're going to do it at Sunday morning at 10 o'clock or whatever. We wanted to make sure that we had some content that would be worthy of our listeners taking some time out of their day to review. So one of the things we did was to actually the first step was to say, let's start writing down a list of artists that we didn't get to do in Summer Soundscapes, right? Because we could only do 10 artists. We knew that there were other artists that we wanted to do. So, for example, um, one of the bands that you actually got me involved in and kind of spurred my interest in was Curiosity Killed the Cat. And not a lot of people know that band. So we thought, well, that'd be a really good example because we could actually share this with our audience. It would bring music that we both love and we both think is really good, and hopefully share that with a wider variety. And then
Yes.
we took a look at um, a few others. I mean, one of the other ones that I think jumped at me was taking a look at Johnny Hates Jazz. Probably a smaller segment of songs there, not as deep a catalog, but again, a lot of songs that are really, really good. Oleta Adams, who was involved with Tears for Fears, so we kind of,
Mm-hmm.
maybe combining a little of that, both the Tears for Fears and the Oleta catalog there, and a couple other ones, jumped out. Everything from really like Daryl Hall. I'm going to say Daryl Hall, but I think there's been a divorce there, so we're going with the Daryl Hall. But the other guy that's part of that. Um,
Poor
um,
John Oates.
and then going into things like Michael McDonald, there's a couple of others that we have listed. I don't want to
Yeah.
blow the catalog totally, but as we started thinking about this, we also kind of came up with some unique ties within music. So, for example, if you think about um, the music that we listen to is comprised of the name brand artist, the face. If you think about Michael Jackson or Prince, right? Those are guys that are like icons. You know who they are. But if you look at a Michael Jackson album, the most popular Michael Jackson works were all produced by Quincy Jones, right? So Quincy had a role in that. And then there's the songwriters, and we
Yes.
identified that like on Thriller, half of Thriller, literally half of the album was written by one songwriter by the name of Rod Temperton. And everyone knows Michael Jackson. A lot of people know Quincy Jones. Not a whole lot of people know Rod Temperton, right? But he's the one
Right.
that wrote the songs. So
He
then we
wrote the
thought
title
of,
tracks for those albums,
yes,
Thriller and Off the Wall.
and Off the Wall, right? Exactly. So we looked at that and said, whether we look at the people that are the producers, or we look at the people that are the songwriters, or in some cases even looking at the people that are the players, because
Mm-hmm.
Michael's singing, but there's some guy on bass, there's some guy on drums, there's some guy on keyboards, right? And the interesting thing is, as you tie all these songs together, in many cases, it's the same guy on drums, on keyboards, on bass, right? But who are these guys? Not everybody knows them. Not everybody's familiar with them.
Right. And I like the fact that you love to highlight those guys. I've learned a lot from you the past 30 months.
Well, and I've learned a lot about you. So, for example, you mentioned Nile Rodgers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you mentioned Nile Rodgers in connection with his work with Duran Duran.
Yes.
And I knew Nile Rodgers because of Chic, right? But that's all I knew. I didn't know all the other stuff.
And I don't understand how. How do you not know that he produced Let's Dance and Like
Didn't
a
know it.
Virgin?
Didn't know
Did
it.
you know he worked with Diana Ross and Sister Sledge too?
Didn't know it. So that's the thing. And I'm thinking, well, we each bring our own unique perspective. The other one was Arif Martin.
Yes.
There's another producer that, was very involved with a variety of different groups and specifically with some groups that we just absolutely love. So along the way with that, we then also kind of figured out that I'll use Curiosity Killed the Cat as an example of a group that people should know that they don't know. And
Yeah.
we looked at this and said, within our scope of music, there's probably other people, other artists that are like that. So one of them that comes to mind is Patrice Rushen. And I always knew that, Patrice from kind of almost the semi-disco stuff. I remember dancing to, to that kind of stuff back in, I guess it was the late 70s, early 80s, something like
Forget
that.
Me Nots.
Yes, absolutely. But then as you look at her life's work, her talent, her contributions, there's a lot more there.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's a lot more there. And that's some of the things that we wanted to kind of get involved. So some of it is the artists that should have been bigger. There's a couple of other examples of that, right?
Yes.
And then some of them are the other, as we kind of walk through this, we found that artists that I think people think of as one-hit wonders.
Mm-hmm. Like
But really what?
Aha.
Yes, exactly. And
Like Scritti. Yeah.
yeah, like Scritti. So that's the other element that I think brought us to this point of saying, yeah, there's something here, right? We
Mm-hmm.
can take a look at some of these artists that you've heard one or maybe two songs from, and you know them, but that's all you know. And digging deeper into the catalog for what's really there. Or in the case of some of these other people, a good example to me is New Radicals. New Radicals have a song that I think most people know, right? Which
Yeah.
is
I only know that one song.
exactly, you get what you get.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting is the band broke up, so the label wouldn't really promote them. They weren't touring because they were broken up, and the label really pulled all the support. But there's another phenomenal song on that album, and then the frontman from New Radicals, Greg Alexander, goes on to produce music that you really know and that you love. So that's the other interesting thing is, how these artists kind of cross pollinate. And in some cases, were very significant. And we just know them for one thing, so.
Yeah, because you think about, well, whatever happened to, and then you read that they're, not making music, but they're producing it
Right.
for other people.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's really the genesis of our project here. I mean, I'm looking at everything from, I'm looking at a list right now that, everything from, I don't know, Huey Lewis and the News, Sade, Jay Graydon. That's a name you might not be familiar with. DeBarge, Anita Baker, Quincy Jones, just to name a few. So we went through our list, and I think we came up with something like 50 different unique projects, and it's going to take us a while to get to all those. But we're also continually learning and continually developing our catalog of music and specifically music that we really, really like. One of the best examples of that just happened on Saturday, and I doubt this is a group that we're going to get to. I doubt that this is a group that we're going to spend a whole lot of time on. But I'm driving back from Chicago after going to the concert, and had on it just like a one of the Spotify playlists where they kind of link songs that they think you might like. And one of them was by Kindred the Family Soul.
Mm-hmm.
I never heard of them.
Unbelievable.
Couldn't spell it to save my life. And it was an earworm. I couldn't stop listening to the song. And when I got back, I'm like sharing that with you, and you're like, oh yeah, I love that stuff. So I'm sure there's going to be others like that we'll be able to learn and we'll be able to share. And
Mm-hmm.
we're also looking for input from the audience. So if there's stuff that you like and you can come on and talk us through it, we'd love to have that.
Yes,
So,
absolutely. We would love to have you.
yeah. So Kelly, in a couple of words, what would you say your goals are for the program?
Well, uh, I think we want to share our love of music, artists that did not get the recognition that they should have, and just have fun.
And did we forget to mention any stories?
I don't know, probably. There are many. I mean, we've known each other for what, almost 3 years now. So yeah,
Yep.
there are plenty of stories.
And we look forward to sharing them with you, and hopefully helping to um, inspire and illuminate some things for you. And if we were able to do that, and in the process have some fun doing it, I think it'll be a great time.
Yep.
So thanks for listening, and until next time, remember, it's not the beat, it's the groove.
Bye.